on something that, again, as a road commission, we are directly involved, but with our partnership with the townships are very important, and we count on the townships and those local units of government to give us the road system that we have right now. And without that contribution, it will not be as good as it is. That's about all I got. So, yellow card stays in.
Jim, I apologize for mispronouncing your name. Someone named Kulishek is used to that. Okay, our next speaker is William Saunders from the Marquette Area Public Schools.
Thank you, and thanks for having me. I see a ton of educators in the room today, so a nice plug for all those educators that are attending today. Although I'm superintendent, I do have a boss back at work, and she laid out a lot of numbers for me. So before I get into the numbers, I just want to say, touched by everything that I heard today, and just listening to the group and starting to make connections. I'm going to make just a few connections off the top of my head before I get to what my boss told me I had to read for you guys today. Listening to security services and 911 services. We at MAPS just instituted a new security panic pendant system, 100% relying on that 911 security system. God forbid we ever have a situation in the public schools where we need our police in fire and rescue to show up immediately. We are extremely dependent on that system. I listened to MarkTran, and people wouldn't realize, but we have our own busing fleet, but we have a lot of students that come to us that travel MarkTran. Almost entirely our alternative education high school, those students get to our alternative high school through MarkTran. Peter White Library is, again, I see a lot of teachers in the room. Peter White Library is a major resource for us here at Marquette Area Public Schools. A lot of classroom visits, a lot of reading that happens outside the classroom, a lot of summer programs that are happening at Peter White Library. So again, we're touched with that. Roads, as Jim Iwaniki just spoke about. Our buses, our transportation that are traveling those roads. We need quality, safe roads as far as that goes. And of course, again, the fire and rescue. It was just about a month ago where we had a power outage. We had a student stuck on an elevator, and thankfully fire and rescue were there and were able to get that student out of the elevator for us. So a lot of things that I feel touched by just listening to the panel and the presentation today. Now I'll get back to what I was supposed to get to, as my boss told me, and focus back on the presentation. Again, I'm Superintendent Marquette Area Public Schools, but I'm representing Marquette Area Public Schools today, but also Marquette Alger Recess. So I'm going to talk about both numbers and how we're affected. A little bit about the programming. Between the two entities, we serve students birth to age 26. The numbers I'm going to share with you today are a snapshot of the 2014 tax year for my district, and also just the select region of Marquette and again the township. Both districts expand beyond the properties analyzed here for consistency. We'll keep that the same with the other presenters. Educational services are what are typically thought of as classroom setting, textbooks, and teachers. We're going to go beyond that today with some of the services that are going to be affected. Some of those supporting services that are going to be affected include transportation for homeless students, physical therapy for disabled students, managing dietary needs for students with life-threatening allergies, home visits for developmentally disabled children, psychological evaluations, and career planning, to name just a few. Projected loss of revenue. At the 2014 taxable value rates, assuming the We Energies docket, as was already mentioned earlier, is approved and we see a 33% reduction, MAPS would need to return just under $3.3 million in disputed property taxes. The amount of interest we paid back in 2014 was roughly $25,000, and the amount the state would not hold us harmless for is approximately $276,000, which is comprised of interest, loss in sinking fund revenue, and also debt millage. The ISD would see a personal budget loss of about $35,000, and the loss to special education for all districts would be about $335,000. This is distributed annually through the special education millage. The amount of loss to MAPS equates to just under 5 teachers for comparison. The ISD loss would be equivalent to an aide in the early childhood program. And the loss to some of the surrounding districts, Nice, Ishpeming, Negaunee, Munising, Gwinn, Superior Central, to name a few, would have to be made up in cuts to the general fund to sacrifice for the special education mandated services and needs. A little bit about some concerns, some cash flow concerns. Going back to just the 2014 alone, we returned taxes in the amount of $500,000. With the pending consideration for the We Energies, we would have to return an additional $1.5 million. The board and administration have had a struggle to build this into our budgets as we move forward. One of the other areas affected, we've had to raise the debt millage to 0.58 mils for the bonds instead of lowering them to what was the anticipated rate of 0.45 mils due to a smaller tax base. That's going to affect everybody in the room. Our general fund, having been forced to pay interest of almost $25,000 annually, is a new budget item that draws funds away from the hands-on instruction in student needs. I know one of the figures she didn't put in here, and one that I've shared with Randy and others that dismays me considerably. When we do have to pay this money back, the interest that comes with it is either at 4.5% or 8%. When you're an entity like Marquette Area Public Schools, because of state laws, we're not allowed to invest that money. We have no way of making up that money. But the interest that we have to pay back is either 4.5% or 8% interest. So what does that look like for the future? If the MTT rulings continue as they have been trending, MAPS and other educational institutions statewide will most likely see less funding from the state as they are losing tax revenues to the school aid fund. MAPS will also need to reduce the sinking fund projects with respect to the lost revenues, and taxpayers will not enjoy the anticipated reduction of the debt millage because they are making up for loss of taxes paid by the big box stores previously. Special education services are mandatory, so general funds of schools will be tapped to cover the lost revenues for the special education millage designed to provide funding for the most disadvantaged students. Thank you for your time this evening.
Our last speaker this evening will be representing labor, the Upper Peninsula Regional Labor Federation. Mike Thibault will speak about the impact on labor and also the question of equity.
You know, Kelsey from the Mining Journal asked me why I was in the room tonight representing labor here. You know, if this cycle keeps spiraling the way it is, it's going to cost jobs. It's going to put more tax burden on private sector workers. And when we say essential services, they are essential services. We need them. Our working families need those services, so they're either going to have to pay more money in the form of user fees for trails or taxes to support our fire department or police departments. But one thing I was not surprised of when I walked in the room here tonight, I've been a trade unionist for 46 years this year, and I can tell you, it's not the first time. It never surprises me that the UP is the driving force behind some tough and difficult issues and has to educate people in the Lower Peninsula at times to what the real problems are and to bring other people on board to get things done. If you're sitting in this room tonight, obviously you've studied the issue. one thing I've learned in the last 6 or 7 months in working with the committee is that the way you build community is by doing things together. And I'm really proud to have met the new friends that I've been developing, working on that committee, trying to accomplish something, trying to send a message to our legislators. We're lucky our UP legislators get it. They get it, and they're trying to do something about it. But you know, what a groundswell from Fred from 6, 7 months ago. I mean, what a groundswell has been built here, you know. And when we first started talking to the labor community in Lower Michigan, it wasn't even on their radar screen. You know, well, what are you talking about? Well, here it is, you know. Now things are moving. I was down in Delta County the other night. Commend the folks that are starting that committee down there and starting to do work in Delta County. They're growing already. I think there was over 40 people in the room with us the other night. Very commendable, you know. And whether you're from the business community or from the labor community, we're talking about fairness. We're talking about social and economic justice in this community. It's our community. You know, I don't think it was ever mentioned here that when some of these retailers move into an area and they're enticed to come into an area, they get tax incentives to start with. You know, so how much is enough for them? One thing labor is trying to do is to work with other members of the community, other groups in the community. We've been reaching out to clergy, faith communities over this issue, other social issues, economic issues. Reverend Rafer Ray from the Episcopal Church wrote a statement that he would like me to read tonight, if you folks would give me a minute to read that. At the heart of our Christian faith is a belief that our relationship with God should be a mirror for the way we live in community with one another. We respect the dignity of each person because we see the face of God on our neighbor. We share the bounty of our work with one another because we believe the source of abundance and life itself is God, and that we are stewards of those gifts. The dark store tax valuation reductions will affect every part of our communities: education, public safety, public health, infrastructure repairs and improvements, transportation, senior and youth services, libraries, veteran services. It appears there is no one who will be untouched. The Episcopal Diocese of Northern Michigan and its 24 churches in the Upper Peninsula is supportive of the businesses across the UP that provide jobs, services, and products for our population. We believe the businesses of all sizes can and should be engaged and productive members in the local and regional communities. We call on business leaders to see the broader implications of the dark stores ruling and to work together with governments and service providers to strengthen our communities. What harms the community is ultimately detrimental to that business itself. The Episcopal Diocese of Northern Michigan urges our state legislators to actively support our commitment to protect and maintain our current level of services to our communities, and to work diligently to support our constituents and our local communities. We appreciate the work of those gathered tonight, speaking to the pressing and disturbing topic with far-reaching implications. On behalf of the people of the Episcopal Diocese of Northern Michigan, signed Rayford J. Ray, Bishop. Bishop Ray had a commitment in Sault Ste. Marie, I believe, tonight. Otherwise, he would have been in attendance here. But again, you folks all deserve a round of applause for being in this room tonight. win this battle, there is strength in numbers. And we've grown our numbers substantially. Now it's up to us, word of mouth, talking to your neighbors, talking to your friends, getting on the phone, using social media, signing the petition. You know, the services we enjoy in this county are excellent. We can't lose them. And, you know, Mike Stucco said, I hate paying taxes. He was great, you know. I don't mind paying taxes if I'm getting the services that I'm paying for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. I think that was just an excellent way to kind of sum up what we've been talking about this evening. And someone once said, taxes are the price of civilization. I think that's true, as long as they're fair. But we need to remember that. I, too, am just very moved by all the people who turned out this evening. I mean, they talk about the country being polarized and cynical. Well, you're all here, and you're talking about something as confusing as a ruling by the tax tribunal. I mean, you wouldn't think that would pack a room, but it's one of those things that people connected the dots and they see how it's going to affect their daily life. But this isn't a one-off event. We asked you to sign these things at the beginning. We want to keep this going because I fear that this is not going to be resolved in the next week or so. This is going to go on. This legislation that's there is going to have to be gotten out of committee. You're going to have to keep our legislators' feet to the fire. You're going to have to make sure that they are continuing to pursue this. The Bright Stores movement is a good adjunct to what we're doing with regard to legislation. It's really a continuing battle, and it has profound impact. We're going to go into questions and answer session here in just a moment. Greg, you didn't have to sing at all. I'm glad about that. Do you have any things of housekeeping, logistical sort of thing that need to be touched on?
Any more registration forms?
Why don't you re-emphasize this thing here?
In fact, that's what I'm going to do. There may be some people who will leave now. Hopefully you'll stick around for any questions. But if you do, remember we have the directions on this. To get the legislators to do what they have to do, we need to go ahead and show that we have the support across the state. So the social media petition that we have going is the way to do that. So make sure that you do that when you go home tonight or first thing tomorrow morning.
As I said, I thank you all for coming, and I thank the speakers for the presentations. They were really right on. Not only did we learn about the impact of dark stores, but we learned about what a lot of these great programs are delivering in terms of services. So it was an educational opportunity as well. If you have questions, please stand up and speak extremely loudly when you...
Visit mqtfairshare.org for further information on how the rulings of the Michigan Tax Tribunal are negatively impacting communities across the state and what you can do to help solve this problem.